I mean, we could afford it. We've got plenty of profit, but we're not going to. That expense is not in our budget. We didn't allocate the money for it.
That's right.
Even though it's a major problem.
We had to put a water fountain in the lobby. We can't do that this year. Okay.
Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right. Protect your patience. Day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right.
So, Donna, last week we talked about several costly cybersecurity assumptions. And, we talked about small organizations being too small to be targeted. That's a myth. Large organizations, they're protected because they have more resources. Well, that's not always true either. We pointed out size doesn't determine your cybersecurity risk. And then there's a term in healthcare that we often use to describe from the standpoint of being a target. We call them a target-rich, resource-poor target. So what that means is they got a lot of good stuff and they ain't protecting it very well. So there's a term that's come up and it's coined by Wendy Nather, and the concept is cybersecurity poverty line. And so we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, I think it is a very interesting concept and it's been out there like 2011, 2013, early teens when she suggested it and created this way to frame it, because we know that you can't just say, oh, they're small, so they don't have anything, or they're large and they're fully protected. We already know that. We know that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so she, I think, hit on something. And I kind of forgot about it until I saw an article from Sophos that they were revisiting the concept and talking about it. And I'm like, you know what? It's the same conversation like we had last week, plus we're having constant conversations in our HSCC work about workforce issues. And, they already did last year, maybe even the year before. I don't remember when we released the resource constrained report.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is really interesting and an interesting way for you to go ask that question of where's my poverty line at? What side am I on?
Right. Yeah. So a definition of the cybersecurity poverty line is the point below which an organization cannot be effectively secured because it lacks one or more critical resources. And I bet you're probably asking, what are those critical resources, David? We'll talk about that too.
Well, and we always have to start with what it's not.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like you have to have a percentage of your budget. And we see that all the time. You should be sending at least X percentage of your budget on this. It's not that you have good or bad or mature or immature. And we already talked about small. None of that matters with the way that she put this together. And I really like it because it says it's the way you're running things.
Yeah. Yep.
Which, it's these structural constraints that you may be creating for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are 4 different forces, as you have it here, that we'll talk about.
Yes.
And so you mentioned one of them not being a budget number, but the force number 1 we want to talk about, because you might as well go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. Let's talk about money. Because you can't do much without it. And you have to have funding, otherwise you can't have things like proper security tools. I love those people who are like, but there's free security tools. And I'm like, free doesn't mean free. Free means that you're transferring money and paying for it in time, usually. It's like there's a trade-off.
Or like those free VPN tools that you can get
Yeah.
that are actually catching all your traffic and using it. You're giving up the information you think you're protecting.
Yeah. There's definitely that. I've seen, and what I'm talking about when I say you're not paying for it with money, but you're paying for it through either expertise or other time. Even in my past life, I would find something that's a free tool. I'm like, look, this open source free tool does what I need it to do, but I don't know how to use it, or I don't know how to use it well, or it takes a lot of time and energy to do it, but it's free. And so instead of spending the money, I spend an enormous amount of time trying to manage this tool so I don't have to spend the money. So I'm just shifting my cost is all I'm doing. But without the money, you can't have the security tools. You can't have security staff. Now, whether you outsource that, which is what most smaller and even medium-sized entities do, because you probably can't afford and don't want to afford 6-figure employees doing cybersecurity within your organization. You can't afford the training. You can't afford incident response resources. There's all these different things that require on money. So you have to have
money. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing that most people consider when we say, "Where's the cybersecurity poverty line?" This is it. This is all they think about. They don't take it any further. If you don't have the money, that's it. But sometimes you don't need a ton. You need some. But even if you have some amount of money, it can't do it all by itself. You know, you're still not, oh, well, we threw a lot of money at it, so now we're secure.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about that all the time with clients. Like you can have me put in all the best stuff, and you could throw a massive amount of money at the problem, and you could still have a ton of cybersecurity gaps because it's not all that money.
And it is often that we'll hear, well, we pay top dollar for all the best. Okay. But then what do you do? And that's where the next stuff comes in.
Yeah.
And the rest of the poverty line.
So the next one is expertise. And I see this as a big problem oftentimes when I have a client or prospect that tells me that one of their staff members, particularly the doctor, like the doctor does our IT. Okay. I did have one recently tell me, yes, I do our IT, but I do also realize that I know enough to be dangerous. I can appreciate that. Yeah, I can appreciate
work that.
But even in my conversation with him, he said, I'm buying the good stuff. And he named some name brands. And I'm like, yeah, you are. He's like, but I don't know that I have it configured right. I'm like, there you go. So expertise is an issue here because you might not know what to buy. You're buying stuff off the shelf at Walmart, which is not good for a business. Or you have no earthly idea how to configure it, because just because it quote unquote works doesn't mean it's configured properly.
Yes.
Then you don't know how to monitor it. And even if it is producing things to monitor, you're not looking at it. And then what do you do when something goes wrong? Because I can tell you, if you call me out of the blue, like, hey, David, I know you don't know who I am, but like, we're having a ransomware attack right now. Can you help? And I'm like, dude, I have no earthly idea. Your environment, who you are, what's going on. Like the responding to that is a massive undertaking, for which a lot of MSPs are like, no, I'm good. No, thanks. Like I'll respond to a client because I already know everything to get us going. But I don't know who you are and you call me out of the blue, and good luck.
Well, and going back to monitoring it could be telling you all along that this is about to happen.
Yeah.
How many times do you hear people say, well, yeah, it's been doing that, but we just clicked through it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've even had times where an employee said, we had a breach of our email, but I didn't bother to tell anybody because our manager was on vacation for 2 weeks. So I was waiting on them to get back. Because that's who our SOP says I'm supposed to report to. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
So, for example, I remember you talking before about going in to help somebody that had gotten a backup tool and said, paying big money for it, but then didn't configure it properly and weren't really backing anything up at all and couldn't figure out why they couldn't restore.
Right. They actually hadn't been backing up for 3 years. And, talking about the monitoring, like the tool was telling them the backups weren't running, but nobody was looking at it. They set it up, they configured it, it did its first backup, and they were like, I'm done.
Yeah.
and never looked at it again. It literally took one backup the first time and never worked again. And if it weren't for me, they wouldn't even notice it 3 years later, which also happened to be 2 weeks before their server crash, that we now know in hindsight.
Got there just in time.
It
was like you could feel that server quaking.
Yeah. I told him, I was like, you must have been living right, boy, because 2 weeks from now, you'd have been toast if I hadn't come along.
So if we know we have or don't have a little money, a lot of money, that alone not going to help. If you don't have money, you got a problem, which we'll get to the flip side of that in a minute. But, just buying more stuff doesn't equal you're using the stuff properly, or even if you need it. How many things do we talk about? They just bought a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And then never used it. It's like they're treating the cybersecurity as a DIY project at home.
Yeah. Well, there are some people that also don't trust IT or MSP because they've had a bad experience in the past. And there are now consultants that are cropping up that are kind of the middleman between the MSP and the client. I'm starting to see a few of these come up where they're saying, look, we'll make sure that your MSP is selling you something that is reasonable and appropriate, but we'll also communicate back with the MSP on things that are problems that you need to address. And so we'll make sure both ways that things are being done properly, because the clients don't know what they don't know. And the client also doesn't have a great relationship. Maybe it's a new MSP or something like that. So I'm starting to see people doing that.
Well, we do that to some extent with our clients. We don't, to what you're seeing, where they're actually facilitating the entire process. But we are doing that when it comes to the, making sure that what you do have is actually working the way you need it. And they've proposed things that you really should be doing and you're not doing. We're going to tell them that. We're going to be that interface, and we're going to try to get the IT provider to understand what we expect them to be doing and be that middle person. And it's because that expertise doesn't exist.
Nope, it does not.
So money, expertise, then what?
So the next one is capability. And this is where I want to go ahead and throw out the AI thing because, and this is not part of what was it? Wendy? Is that her name? Make sure I don't mess it up. I don't think this is part of what Wendy was talking about 11 years or 12, 15 years ago, whatever it was. But part of what AI gives us the ability to do is increase our capability for better or for worse. It gives us the ability to have more capability. And so that can also create these problems because now you're implementing controls that you still don't have the expertise in order to know what they do. But some other examples of capability is, you've got legacy medical devices, so you don't have those up to date. You got unsupported operating systems. You're still running Windows XP or 7 or 10. You're not keeping up with any of that. You can have vendor restrictions. So you've got, your vendors that are not up to date on certain things, or you're using things that they don't support anymore. Obviously, all that rolls into patient safety concerns and clinical workflow requirements. All that can be impacted because of capability.
Well, sometimes, what they're talking about is my infrastructure can't because of where I'm at, it requires way more for me to be able to just start implementing tools and those kind of things. And, the legacy medical devices, those things are hugely expensive.
Yeah.
And often they're running on unsupported operating systems, but the vendors are like, nope, can't change it because patient safety. I mean, you don't want to mess with some, x-ray device so that all of a sudden people are like, is that supposed to burn? And
Hmm.
it's not a joke. It's for real.
Yeah.
No, it's not supposed to burn. And so you're really implementing security around those limitations because these make a huge difference, but you don't have control over those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes not. Like I tell the story about the practice that I actually took them on as a client, but they were still, this is probably maybe 10 years ago, but they were still running a DOS-based EHR. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah,
But
how do you secure that?
It wasn't because the vendor, or it wasn't even because of medical device. It was literally because the doctor just didn't want to pay to continue to upgrade to the newest thing. And the vendor, honestly, they were causing part of the problem because they were continuing to support it. Once the vendor said, we're not supporting this anymore, you're done, they had to change at that point.
Well, and that's the whole part where you have to say, well, we're able to continue doing this, so we're going to do it as long as we're able.
Mm-hmm.
But once we don't have the capability of doing that, now we're going to change things. But it's exactly, sometimes the capability is I can still do it, not that I can't do it.
Yeah. And even on the support side, like a lot of MSPs won't support operating systems that are outdated, or they won't support it, but for so long. Like if you called and said, hey, will you support Windows XP? Most MSPs will probably tell you no. It's not that they can't do it. They won't do it. It's too much liability and too many problems involved in that.
Well, I think another area is how many places you go into, and I know, out in your area, you've probably run into these, where you used to have a client when we did MSP work that they were literally at the end of where, like the communications contracts switch from one provider to another,
Mm-hmm.
It's like the line will not go any further.
Yeah.
And we have no reason to run a line down into that one little office park that's right there at the end. And there's 5 buildings. And unless all you guys are willing to pay, we're not going to run any lines.
Yeah.
So their internet speed was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm hoping they're able to deal with it because the wireless, it was kind of down the hole, so they didn't get good wireless either. And none of those things were things that they could control.
Yeah.
So
sometimes
it's just out of your control.
Yep. And then the last of the 4, influence.
Yes.
Who can we talk about here?
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got the influence of things like, your vendors, your business associates, your cloud providers, your medical device manufacturers, of course, your leadership team, your executive leadership, your owners, or maybe you have a board that governs all this stuff and they're making these decisions. So all those can roll into influence.
Yeah. And none of that has to do with technology. It's limitations that are to your cybersecurity that are being set based on the influence of those sources. And could be your internal leadership, could be the board, or, like we were just talking about, the vendors don't have a solution. And it's a matter of you're trying to get somebody to change their behavior or policies, procedures, processes, those kind of things. The right people, you need the right people to support the mission of securing the organization. If you don't have the right people in your vendors, your business associates, the right providers, you don't have all of that, it's going to influence your ability to secure things. And I feel like we're about to loop back to money because executive leadership can influence all the other three.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty clear little list that one or more of these not working together to make the others function is where your poverty line is. Which one are you missing? That's where you're poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you've got the money, you don't have the expertise to buy the right tools, and nobody knows how to use it. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You got the expertise, you don't have the capability, so now you can't create recommendations, and you don't know what to implement. You got the capability without the influence, so now you've got your vendors and your leadership prevent you from doing the things that you need to do. Or then you got the influence, but you don't have the money. So it's like you can't pay for it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. You need a balanced amount of all of those.
Yep.
But the most important thing goes back to it is not a budget number you aim to achieve. None of that is a specific budget number.
If it were only that easy. You just give me this amount of money and everything else will just fall in place.
Yeah. And so, this Sophos article was taking us through all of that. And, they point out that people misunderstand the poverty line because they think it's a budget number. And in healthcare, we see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and read some of the comments in the resource constrained reports, you'll see that it's those three things are the resources that are constrained.
Yeah. Well, one thing to kind of throw out there and make sure people realize is just because you're a small organization does not mean that you're automatically resource poor or below a poverty line or whatever. Because we have heard that constantly from certain people that small organizations can't afford anything. It's not true. That's a myth. Small organizations can be above the poverty line, and they often are above the poverty line. On the same token, or maybe the opposite side of the token, large organizations can be below the cyber poverty line. So it could go either way.
Yes, and I think that is the biggest reason that I want to talk about this particularly is that healthcare part of it, because so many, like you said, well, they can't pay for anything. You're going to need to basically do it for free. Okay, even if I did, but there's more to it than that, and you need all of these things. You can't have three that are working together and one that's not. All four have to work together.
Yeah.
So understanding that, and you're right, we've been told that plenty of times.
Well, I don't ever believe that to be the case, because anytime there's a major incident, somehow they come up with what they need. It's like I don't have $1,000 a month to spend on IT and cybersecurity, but then an incident happens and all of a sudden you're willing to pay the bad guy $250,000.
Yeah. We're going to put that expense off because, yes, I mean, we could afford it. We've got plenty of profit, but we're not going to. That expense is not in our budget. We didn't allocate the money for it.
That's right.
Even though it's a major problem.
We had to put a water fountain in the lobby. We can't do that this year. Okay.
But when we're looking at that big picture back to healthcare, target rich, resource poor. Mm-hmm. And they are. We know this, and we know it's complicated. But we also can't make assumptions. And I know our last episode was about assumptions. But then after we recorded that, I read this article and I'm like, it's another assumption that goes with it of, well, we're just resource poor, we're resource constrained, we can't do it, we've got this and that and all these other lines that are preventing us from doing it. But then that's what brought me back to, let's talk about the difference in that resource constrained. You could be resource constrained, but not be under the poverty line.
Yeah. I mean,
So
technically, isn't everybody resource constrained to some extent? I mean,
I know I am.
There's no unlimited amount of funds that you have. So I guess, to some degree, everybody is resource constrained. Otherwise, you just blow it all.
So, and so I went back and I pulled what is the definition, because I remember, that was a big key whenever we do this analysis stuff. Define it clearly. Got to start there. And so they defined a resource constrained provider as a medical facility or individual practitioner encountering significant obstacles in providing comprehensive healthcare services and conforming to operational standards, often due to financial constraints, geographic isolation, or patient population characteristics. So that's very different, because it's talking about the actual organization, what the organization has, the big picture of it. Whereas the cybersecurity poverty line definition is about the cybersecurity condition. Is there funding being applied, expertise being applied? Do we have the capability to even protect ourselves, and we have the support of leadership or all of the right influences in place? If I can keep those in sync, then I can still be resource constrained, but it's not that I am considered incapable of any security. It may not be the best, and it may not reach the full operational standards in healthcare, because we have different standards.
Yeah.
But I'm not poor.
Yeah. Well, according to the definition, there's not an or here, there's an and. So it says you have to have significant obstacles in providing comprehensive healthcare services and conforming to operational standards. So oftentimes what we see is they don't have a problem at all providing comprehensive healthcare services. They just don't want to conform to the operational standards.
Yeah.
That doesn't
You're
make
right.
you resource constrained. So you have to have both, not one or the other.
Yeah. And so, I mean, resource constraint can have a lot to do with things. I mean, the cuts to payments that they had been getting for years and built all of their plans around, and then all of a sudden they're no longer going to have Medicaid, and their population is mostly Medicaid. There's not a lot they can do about that.
No.
Right? But that creates that resource constrained environment. But the next piece of it is, can we still secure ourselves?
Right. Yeah. I would say the biggest problem I have is oftentimes they have the money to pay for it. They don't necessarily mind paying for it, but you can't get them to participate after that. And, the resource constraint then is, I don't have the time. I'm doing other things, whatever. It's not a priority for them.
And that to me is the biggest issue that influence brings to the table. That if they are participating, leadership commitment, and I mean, we talk about this all the time. Yeah, maybe there's some funding and it's recognized that it needs to happen, but how many every one of our boot camps ends in a discussion of how do we get leadership to pay attention to what we're saying. And we're not ending it on purpose there. It ends with, that is almost always some of the final questions.
Yeah, because you can arm everybody with all the resources and the knowledge and skills and everything else. But if leadership's like, we don't need that, then you're done. It stops.
Well, that, or I'm not doing those things, but everybody else has to.
Yeah.
Or, only these people have to follow those rules, but not these people.
Hmm.
That immediately now you have influence issues because I cannot influence the people that need to follow the rules. So I'm not going to be secure.
Yeah.
And that is one of the areas that is not expensive to fix. And if you fix that, it often has influence on all the other three immediately. If you can't get the right influence in the leadership stuff, and here's a great place because it reminded me right away when Change Healthcare CEOs in front of Congress in the middle of their massive madness, right? And we talked
Hmm.
about it constantly back then. We were talking about what was happening and what they were saying. And one of the points that Congress during the testimony hit them with was that cybersecurity expertise was not represented at the board level. They had no one on their board that understood cybersecurity. You had to go down multiple layers before you actually had people that understood cybersecurity. They didn't have influence even at the top in an organization that big.
Yeah.
United Healthcare. But that's now you're starting to see, interestingly enough, cybersecurity coming to our friend that we've had here several times, Eric Decker, now, having discussions about joining boards because he's been a CISO at such a high level.
Hmm.
It's not something I'm interested in taking on, but I can go in there and tell you, a little bit of advice and at least tell you how much trouble you're in. But if you don't have people at the top level that are communicating from the top down, this is important. That's it. Just this is important. Then none of the other three are going to resolve.
Yep. That's right.
So to me, we have to look at it and we look at healthcare, and it doesn't matter small, large, suburban, urban, out in the boonies with David. Now there's folks way further out. I've gone and worked at rural hospitals where I had to drive to another town because they didn't have a hotel. So,
Yep.
actually in another state, I had to cross a state line to find a hotel. They had one,
Yeah.
but let's just say it felt a lot more like a dewdrop inn than anything. I'm not even sure anybody stayed in it anymore. So you have the issues. Yeah, you're going to have the budget, the expertise. You look at these rural areas, even if they wanted to hire somebody, could they? Not locally. And at least I don't know how many you're finding out. I mean, I know there's some folks that live out and that would do it, but it would be a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's harder to find people for sure. Even though from a technology standpoint with what we do, a lot of it's remote, there still has to be some on site. And oftentimes, I'm going to send a technician out. They're 2 hours away from anybody who can get to them. I mean, you're looking at a minimum of a half day that you're sending out a very high price resource on site. It's costly.
Oh yeah. It's like the folks that they're asking me to travel a full day to do a 30-minute talk on something and then travel a full day back. But by the way, we want you're going to get exposure to all of our people, so we don't need to pay you. Do you know how many accounts and how many years I would have to have them? But no, they don't understand. But again, it has to do with actually having the right connections. So you could have money, have remote expertise like your clients do with you, where they're 2 hours away from you. And the good news is today you can do a lot of it. You know, get on a video call. Now turn your phone around. Get a little closer. All right, take a picture of that and zoom it in for me so I can see the model number. You know, it's what we do now. It's great.
Yep.
Although I have to take a picture of things and I'm right there with it just because I'm blind now and I can't see it. But I remember the first time I was able to do that when I was trying to talk somebody through something. You know, it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I know. It's I remember trying to do it back in dial-up days with PC Anywhere. That was hard to do, but we did it.
Yeah, boy. You know, everybody's got a different story that gets them there. But the important thing is to know that if you're not secure, then it's one of those 4 factors, maybe more, that you need help with.
Yeah.
And if you have an understanding of it and the intent of being secure, then you can solve it. And so I think that's where the value is, you know, it's not to criticize yourself or any of those things. It's to say, look, we know because we are really, really, really suffering because of this one area and we're not dealing with it properly. And that is the constraint that we are at least preventing ourselves from a reasonable level of security.
Yeah.
So
to kind of reiterate, the cybersecurity poverty line is not, like you said, not a maturity score, budget number, not a measure of whether you're good or bad, all those things. But it's got to be things where you're asking yourself the questions about money, expertise, capability, influence. Which one is it? Or a combination of things.
Yeah. And don't just say we don't have money. Maybe you have some. Let's see and lay out all of the 4 and look at all 4 factors realistically to determine how are we addressing all 4, because you have to address all 4.
Yeah. Yep. More times than not, I run into people that they usually have the money because, I think for what we do, it's a very budget conscious service. So it's usually not a matter of money, but they don't have the expertise, which is why they're hiring us. They don't have the capability, which is again, why they're hiring us. And then we just have to get through the influence level, because sometimes we run into, for example, a practice administrator is doing their best to try to do this because they want to meet compliance and all this other stuff. They want to protect the practice. But then you may have one of the people that are making the decisions that are like, well, I don't know, man. Can't we just do what we did 10 years ago?
Yeah. You know, I am not doing that. That's going to slow me down.
Yeah.
Okay.
That, or, HIPAA's just here to get in my way. And again, I don't even talk about HIPAA. Like, I don't care to that degree about HIPAA. I'm trying to do the security pieces of it and all that. I'm not here to, be the poster boy for HIPAA. Like, if you're doing everything right, you'll meet the HIPAA standards.
Yeah, and that's the thing we teach over and over. We teach it in the boot camp. We teach it in our all different kinds of training. We have those discussions all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about compliance. It's just I wonder where
I've
that
never heard that.
Yeah, which actually, though, we should have probably led with this, David. The big compliance news, which we'll have to do, I guess, an episode when we get a little more info, is guess what? The security rule being the final rule coming out has been changed now to 2027.
Yeah, like a year from now. Which, not a surprise at all. Because I just mentioned, I think it might have been last episode, that I didn't see it happening, before the end of the year. And here we are. It's going to be middle of next year. So,
And in that same conversation, we talked about the fact that privacy was probably going to come on out. There were going to be some, if not all. And guess what? The date on the privacy went from May to August. So we're about to get it. Anyway.
Batting 1,000 there.
Yeah, but nobody ever listens to us. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, as they say in the commercial, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
There you go. It is. That is really it. You're right.
All right. Anything else?
No,
You
I
feel
think
less poverty stricken now?
yeah, I mean, it is easy to say that you're poverty stricken, but then once you realize they're all working together, you just need more of some of them. You know, you're not below the poverty line. Yeah. And you don't want to be there.
No, you don't. But I think there are fewer people there than think they are. So, all right. That is our show for today, folks. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us again next week. And remember, for Donna and myself, that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.